Hello, Kaduna. The Public and Private Development Sector is actually a non-profit outfit, and what we do basically is to support reformers, especially people who are in government or out of government, to drive significant reforms across different sectors. Okay. I'm sure when the listeners heard Budeshi, their mind went to procurement because that's what we've been doing for quite a long time until you mentioned that this access to justice. Yes. So recently, we've also took the Budeshi concept into the access to justice conversation, and we've been supporting the Kaduna State government in the past 2 years to improve the justice sector, especially regarding court administration and case management. And in the next few years, we'll also now be looking through pretrial detention and how best we can reform the system. Okay. That's what we've been doing.
I'm sure Nigerians know that specific area needs a whole lot of reform. And I'm sure before we are done with the program today, we'll first of all understand what PPDC is doing in that area. And also, you would also have some other inklings to what it's all about. Now, looking at our subject of discussion this morning, we'd like to start with how is PPDC actively involved in reshaping the administration and management of criminal justice in Nigeria?
Yes. Yeah, surely. To start with, first, it's very important to acknowledge the actors, the statutory actors in this very key system. And who are the statutory actors? Starting with the judiciary themselves, taking law enforcement agencies like the Nigerian Police Force, like the Department of State Security, that's the DSS, like the NDLE, and a lot of other law enforcement agencies. And it's also very important to recognize the role of Minister of Justice, because they are, we used to call them the attorney of the state. They are the law firm of the state. So what PPDC have been doing recently is to support all of these key stakeholders to improve what they are doing. Part of our key approach is we normally don't have an agenda, but they have their own reform commitment and they have their own reform agenda. And what we normally do is to support their own key reform agenda. And why is that important? Because they've been there for quite a long time. Let me say from existence. And they are going to stay there forever. PPDC projects can come and go. We could change our strategy, but those key institutions are there forever. And that's why we don't just do it. We support them to do it better. And part of the lessons we've learned about supporting them is as time goes on, they're able to do that more effectively. They're able to understand it. They're able to sustain it. And they're able to infuse all of those learnings into their key programs. And that have actually supported them to do better. And we've started seeing some results, and we'll continue to harvest on those very key results for key service improvements.
Okay, thank you so very much. And from what you've said now, you PPDC have been involved in helping them to improve on those areas that they want to strengthen. Now, what are some of the specific gaps that you have seen in the current criminal justice administration, and what has PPDC identified as a focal point for reforms?
Yes, let me start with something that's very novel, case management conversations. Okay. For example, there's this adage we usually talk about that whichever case file you see is actually representing someone's life. Conversation around criminal justice and why it's very, very tricky is you have to prove beyond reasonable doubt, because you can either make someone's life or you mar someone's life. So there are a lot of procedures in there, and you need to be very, very judicious, or else, because part of the biggest fear is when you take someone who is innocent and you termed him as not innocent, you've already wasted his life. Yeah. So part of the key things that we've continued to converse is, could we start taking case management very important? And where does case management start? It starts from the police, from the very first point of investigation, from conversation around the FIR, up to the Ministry of Justice, up to the courts, up to the corrections. So we felt it's very important when we improve how we manage case files and now not just case file, the case system in its entirety. Because when one person fails to do what he's supposed to do, it affects the other one. When a police prosecutor fails to do what he's supposed to do, it affects the Ministry of Justice for them to give legal advice. It affects the court, it affects the corrections, and at the end, you find it being a chain. So we felt it's very important for us to support the reform agenda of the state on conversation around case management. And what have we done in that very key regard? First is to support the judiciary to standardize the process manually. For example, especially for the magistrate courts. Presently, we've been able to support 25 magistrate courts as a pilot to see how best can we improve the manual case system. Because part of our learning is if you don't have a good manual system, even if you digitize the system, you're only digitizing a wrong system. Because majorly, when we talk about technology, it's not an end on itself. It's actually a means to itself. So when you have a poor system, all you're doing is you're transferring that poor system into a digital system, and you continue there. So first, what we did is to support these magistrate courts to first improve their manual case system. And the intention is in the long run, we're going to further digitize that very case system. But for the high courts, because it's actually a court of record, when we did the need assessment, we understood they were a little bit better when it comes to the manual system. And part of the thing we did is to shift them to the digital system. Definitely, as also a learning point, because we're not discarding the manual system presently. What we're doing is trying to go hybrid to learn. Maybe subsequently, when we are very sure that we have a foolproof digital system, and then we can convert and say, okay, we're going paperless. So for the high courts, presently we've supported 16 high courts with a case management system, a digital case management system, which gives almost all key stakeholders ability to work on that very system, including assignment of the case by the Honorable CJ, taking of court proceedings and summaries at the individual court. So at least it gives people the ability to do that. And also a scheduling. Part of the key thing we understood is court is supposed to sit or it's not supposed to sit. There are adjournments or there are not. And at times that also becomes very tedious. So part of the component of that case management is to give scheduling, send an email, and there's also a plugin for SMS which all parties can be notified quickly to say, oh, your court appearance is in this very key date. So that's the case system, that's the case management system. And it has proven to be helpful, and we've continued to, because actually a learning process for everyone. It's going to take time. There's a digital divide, but we intend that we're going to continue to support the state through this very key learning process, and it's our intention that subsequently we're going to get adapted to that, and it's going to be part of a very key system. And that's for case management. For records management, for example, there's a form that usually when you fill and they say, have you ever been criminally convicted? And I know all Nigerians will say no. Yes, because nobody has a record. There's no database which people can actually check vis-a-vis to say, oh, he has actually been convicted. And something about it's because it's criminal. Something we piloted is to say, okay, can we take up those criminal cases? Can we digitize those criminal systems? Can we create a registry for those criminal systems where immediately a criminal case have been closed, those criminal case files can come back here and we can have a database. It's also a learning process because we're starting. So what we intended is the next few years when I have a database, for example, of all people that have been criminally convicted, there's a place where someone can say, okay, let me go back to this very key database to check in. Well, the biggest problem is people are convicted for criminal things and then they go scot-free. What I mean by they go scot-free is after serving their own sentence, the other key things that are supposed to, no other consequences for that. So and we have a lot of conversation because it's criminal where you come and files are missing, a lot of things are happening, mysterious things are happening, and you can't fall back to that. And because their papers, as time goes on, they become readable, a lot of things happen to that, and that's why we're also checking to the computer around digitizing some of those very key files. At least have a digital copy where you can always refer back to them as we continue to go further. And a lot of other key interventions in that very key regard.
Okay. Yes, you're listening to Budeshi Radio, and today we are looking at access to justice and the criminal justice system in Nigeria. And I have with me in the studio Ahmed Mohammed. He's been giving us some insight into what PPDC is doing in and around all of these. And still talking about digitizing the system and the fact that most often than not in Nigeria, when somebody commits a crime, after serving his term, the other consequences that should come as a result of what you've done, they escape it. I can also quickly make reference to I had a schoolmate then, way back, gone to prison about 2 or 3 times. And one time that I traveled to visit my folks, I had a guy, he's not a police officer. If there were records of his criminal past, I'm sure there was no way a thing like that could have happened. And God save whoever comes into the hands of that particular guy. Still looking at the program and what we are looking at, you've elaborated on so many things that you're doing, PPDC is doing with the Kaduna state government in the area of access to justice and the criminal justice system. In what other ways do you engage with stakeholders to ensure successful implementation of these reforms in Nigeria?
Yeah, something very critical to our program approach is we all credit goes to our partners. And who are our partners? The people who do the work, the people who are in the ground, the people who do the actual work. The IPOs, for example, now, as common as we want to call them, the IPOs, the magistrates, the high court judges, the police, the corrections, and a lot of other key stakeholders, because it's actually a multi-stakeholder approach. You can't solve criminal justice with one person. And something about the system is they are interlinked. One, you work, it affects another person's work. So if you do a good work, it affects the next person's work, and it keeps going like that. So we've been able to collaborate both horizontally and vertically with all of these very key stakeholders, and especially, as I've earlier mentioned, with the approach of them leading on those very key reforms and us only supporting the little push that we can. And something very uniquely is we've seen a lot of these partners, these collaborators, taking leadership in the whole of this things. Most of the times they even tell us, oh, we did this away from our own support. And that's something we're very, very appreciative about that. We do ABC, and you see them doing EFG,
Yeah.
without even waiting for you. You see them appreciating that very key support. And we've seen a lot of instances where that have actually helped. For example, um, the magistrates now. There's something very unique about Kaduna, for example, our very key partners. Even before we came in, there's something they usually do. When we are talking about scheduling, normally courts have WhatsApp group, as basic as a WhatsApp group, where they post this very key information. So if as a lawyer you're standing for a court, you automatically just join that very group. So where all other updates, for example, when the judge is sitting and when he's not, and all other key information are shared on that very key WhatsApp group. That's innovation. That's low cost innovation, low cost interventions, and we've seen a lot of these key interventions across all the very key stakeholders. For example, legal advice is part of the key thing that almost everyone is complaining about when we talk about the criminal justice system. So, oh, we've took the case file. Police will say we've took the case file to Ministry of Justice, are waiting for legal advice. But then the legal advice will take time, long time. Even though the Administrative Criminal Justice Law says the legal advice should be ready in 14 days. But we've had instances before now where 2 years, 3 years, at times the legal advice will never come. And we've seen concrete commitments from the Ministry of Justice, led by the Attorney General, to say, oh, these are our very key reform agenda. These are the things we envision to do, and we're going to do better. And even when this legal advice took a lot of time, you could actually send in a petition. For example, recently, the day before yesterday, we had access to Justice Town Hall, where we convened a broader level of stakeholders, both vertically and horizontally, to have a conversation, a generic conversation around what are the priorities of the judiciary, what are the priorities of the Ministry of Justice, but that the priorities of the police, the corrections, and all other key stakeholders. And part of the key concrete commitments we even had from the CJ is the Kaduna State Judiciary is going to assign some courts to just be criminal courts.
Okay.
And why is that important? At least I know it's going to improve the speed of those very trials. Yeah. When this court is majorly for criminal cases, at least you know all cases that are here are criminal. Yeah. So it gives that sense of urgency. It's also reduce the pressure. Because when you have a judge sitting for criminal, sitting for civil, sitting for all other things, you can imagine how much work that could be. So that's a commitment that the judiciary have made, and we're going to follow up on that very key commitment for us to decide. Already have started conversation of that nature. For example, EFCC cases, ICPC cases are already assigned to a particular court.
Okay.
So we've already been achieving progress in that regard. But now when we also assign those very courts, we're very optimistic that that's going to help, and we're willing to support them to make that a reality.
All right. So looking at, because we do not have so much time on our hands again, would like to have some examples of successful outcomes of improvement resulting from PPDC's initiatives in criminal justice administration. And have that too briefly.
Yeah, briefly. For example, part of the courts, in 3 courts, we were able to deploy a speech to text system. And what does it do basically? It helps transcribe, record both video, audio, and also transcribe court proceedings.
Just a minute. Yeah. Just the way we see it in other crimes where the person just speaks endlessly.
Yeah.
And the speech is converted to text and okay. We are getting there gradually.
Yes, we are getting there. For example, recently when we had a conversation with one of the magistrates who was using that very case, he told us there was a time when counsels were there and they said something and then he denied it. And then all he said was, please play back the video.
Yeah.
And let me say it. And it was clear. So you could see how important that is. For example, as at yesterday, almost 326 cases have that system have been used for 326 cases. And you could see the speed of that. Before you come in a day, how many cases can you actually take in? So because you have that system, it allows you to take more cases, which also supports the system. Because the dockets are also almost always fill up.
Yes.
So you have the judges, you have the magistrates taking a whole lot of cases. And because that's why at times you take adjournments 3 months, 4 months, at times a year, based on the nature of the case.
And may God help you are not in remand.
Maybe
you committed a crime of just 3 months, and you're taking about 2 years to eventually descend justice. Even when you are found guilty, you've done your time about 4 or 5 times over.
Yeah. So you could see instances of that nature. So the speech checks have been able to at least have a judge is able to take more cases at a time, and it's faster, it's more judicious. And part of the thing we intend to do as we go further is to also connect that speech to text system to the corrections. And this is our innovation. What are we trying to do? For example, when we talk about with corrections, right? That's Nigerian Correctional Service. Part of the key challenges around logistics. They have a lot of courts which they are servicing, and the vehicles are less, and come to think of it, the cost of fuel now. And something we're trying to do now is to set up a virtual system where inmates can appear before a judge virtually. It's a proof of concept. We've tried it in other states, which we're also supporting, because police are also supporting the Nasarawa state government and also the Plateau state government to do similar. And those 2 states that have already been deployed, and we've seen it real time, and it has actually helped. The intention is when you have more people able to join it virtually, it will also speed up the very key process. We intend to do that as we continue to go further, and hope to see much of this very key result as we continue to do better.
All right. Maybe we'll open up the phone lines and see if we can take a call or two. 081 40,000 989 and 070 800 989. The studio lines to dial if you have a question or you need more clarifications on what we've been talking about on Budeshi Radio this morning. The numbers again are 081 40,989 and 070-87-800-989. While waiting for the calls to come in, we would also quickly want to say, looking ahead, what future plans and initiatives does PPDC have to further advance its mission in transforming the criminal justice landscape in Nigeria?
Yes, something we look forward to doing in the next 3 years, for now, is to reform the pretrial detention system in Nigeria. And what is happening? Almost 70% of people who have been held now, inmates, are actually pretrial. And what does pretrial mean? Pretrial means people who are there and they are not there because they are convicted. They are there awaiting for judgment.
What we popularly call remand.
Yes. So, and when you have 70% of the whole people who have been held to be pretrial, it shows that it's actually a problem. And what do we intend to do? We intend to support also the broader level stakeholders, to support the corrections themselves, to improve something they call SIMS, which is Correction Information Management System. And what does that do? It's just also a digital system which gives as basic as biometric. When we watch American films and you see someone's being held, the first thing is they snap a picture, you take a fingerprint.
Yeah.
That's something of that nature. And also the system is going to also have other components, for example, for legal representation, for family, for health. Because a lot of people are actually being held and they have terminal illness and it's causing a lot of problem. Even for the corrections, for themselves and also for the community. I've had instances where inmates are lost because of their very poor health. And we're also willing to support the magistrates and also the high court judges to also perform their statutory duties. For example, based on the SGL, the magistrates are supposed to visit police stations because police officers also do hold people for quite a long time. And the SGL provides that the magistrates should do periodic visits to those police stations and also ensure that those things are speed up. Something we also intend to do is to work with the Nigerian Youth Service Corps members, and also pro bono lawyers to provide legal representation. And something that's very clear about us is, and we keep emphasizing on this, is we're not trying to say people should not be held. Never. We're not trying to say people should not be convicted. Never. What we're saying is the right people should be convicted.
Yeah.
What we're saying is the right process should be followed. Simple and clear.
That no innocent person should suffer
Yeah.
for what he or she did not do. Yes, you're listening to Budeshi Radio right here on Invecta 98.9 FM. And on the program today, we are looking at access to justice and the criminal justice system. And the guest that I have today is Ahmed Mohammed. He's been telling us all that PPDC has been doing in and around the access to justice and criminal justice system. You have a call, you have a question to ask, or you want to know more, you have just like a minute or two to quickly do that. 081 40,989 and 070-87-800-989 are the numbers to dial. And of course, we'll quickly also have the handles of PPDC, so that even if you have questions after the program or you want to know more about PPDC and what we have talked about today, you just either, is it X at them or tweet at them now?
Yeah. So for PPDC that I mentioned, PPDC means Public and Private Development Center.
Yeah.
And it's basically, for example, on Facebook, just PPDC.
PPDC.
NG.
Okay, PPDC NG.
Yes.
There's a space between the NG and PPDC.
No, just
PPDC NG.
That's
okay.
That is it. And the same thing with also our the same thing with Snapchat. Sorry, with Instagram. But for Instagram, PPDC underscore NG.
PPDC underscore NG for Instagram.
Instagram, yes. And same thing with Twitter. It's now called X.
So for Twitter or for X, formerly known as Twitter and Instagram, it's PPDC_NG. And for Facebook, it's PPDCNG. Why not go there, follow them, and get more details in respect of what PPDC does. And of course, Budeshi Radio is powered by PPDC. And PPDC stands for Public Private Development Center. That's about the size of the program today. And until next time when we'll be on again, I want to say a very big thank you to Mohammed and all the folks from PPDC with us in the studio this morning. My name is Ehis Adon. Do have a pleasant day.